All right, welcome everyone to the February 28th Board of Supervisors meeting. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, we are going to start with some special acknowledgements for our police department. Take it away, Chief Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Gussie, for this time. If you could step up. I'd like to have my Captain Brown and Lieutenant Moore are going to step up. Recently, in December of last year, we had another retirement. Sergeant Major retired from the police department, and it opened up a promotional opportunity, which is a big deal. The officers, they have to study, they have a written test, oral interview, and they have a peer review by the other supervisors. To fill that vacant sergeant spot, we were fortunate enough to have one of our all the corporals and detectives were eligible to take that, but I'd like to bring up the Sergeant Craig Islip, along with his family, his wife Joanne. I believe Jason's here, right? Kyle's unable to be here tonight. He is here, he made it? Great, I'm sorry. Corporal Islip, or now Sergeant Islip, is a 24-year veteran of the department. He's a graduate of Westchester University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. In 2003, he was promoted to corporal and was assigned to the patrol division. And then beginning in 2009, he's been assigned to the traffic unit, where he leads the day-to-day operations, planning, and the serious crash investigations for the department. Craig serves as one of our in-house EVOC instructors. He's also a negotiator for the Chester County Emergency Response Team. And pretty much anything that goes wrong or breaks within the police department, Craig somehow finds a way to fix. So I'd like to congratulate Sergeant Islip. He really does a great job for our traffic in the community, the planning and the meetings, and he's always been a valuable asset. He's going to continue to be a valuable asset to the department. Congratulations and thank you for your service. This time I'd like to call up Corporal Josh Smathers, who's with his wife Alyssa and his Madeline. As with anything that happens here, if you move one thing, another thing has to happen. So with the movement of a corporal position, we were able to promote from a previous corporal list, Corporal Smathers. Josh is an 8-year veteran of Tredyffrin Township Police Department. He's a graduate of Juniata College. He's also been a member of our Tredyffrin Township Police Honor Guard, and he also serves on the emergency response team for Chester County as a operator. He also serves for the department as a field training officer for new recruits to help them learn how to serve this community and better themselves for our community. Josh is going to be assigned to the patrol corporal for platoon, and his leadership role will be indispensable. Aside from his family, he's an avid mountain biker, a hiker, and scuba diver. We're excited to have Josh join our supervisor level, and good luck. Thank you for your service. If I could have just a few more moments of the board and the public's time, I'd like to acknowledge several of our promotions and additions that have taken place over the past 2 years. As a result of the meetings being forced to be virtual in 2020 and early into 2021, we were unable to recognize these accomplishments for the officers and their families, so as I would routinely had done. As you can see, it's a big deal for the department to have their peers and friends from the community come out and see their accomplishment. Although the message was relayed in a virtual format, the importance of being out here today in front of you is very significant, and that's what I'd like to do. At this time, they can stay where, some of them are going to stay where they're at, but I'd like to recognize one of the first hires back in 2020 was Officer Tyler Glover. Thank you for joining us. He's doing a great job on the street. I was told not to do it, but I'm going to go through them all. I'd like to recognize Tim Brown for his promotion from lieutenant to captain in September of 2020. He's doing an outstanding job leading this department, assisting me in the day-to-day operations. In November of 2020, we had Justin Davis join us. Is Justin here? That's trying, but he joined us in 2020. In and around that time, we also had some promotions that were very important. If I could have Sergeant Steph Bills stop up. If your family, Lou or Isabel, are here, please join us. If not, I just want to bring, Sergeant Bills has been serving the department. She's our MOPEC training instructor, which is no easy task. Stay up to date to have all the officers prepared. Steph joined the department in 1998. She's a previous K-9 officer and received a lot of awards and accolades with her K-9 partner. In 2012, she was promoted to sergeant or corporal and served in the, as a field training officer and again as a MOPEC instructor. She also helps to organize and run our police summer camp, and back in 2020, she was promoted to sergeant. She's doing an excellent job supervising patrol platoon, and we appreciate all she does. Thank you for your service and congratulations. If I could have Bill Chaplicki stop up, I believe his wife, Lisa Marie, and Liam and Brad. No? Come on up. For those of you who don't know, Bill actually does our social media. He's doing a great job pushing out some of the things that we do day to day. I can't thank him enough for that. Bill was hired as a Tredyffrin officer in 2013, and he was received his promotion in 2020. He's a graduate of Ridley High School and also earned an associate's degree in emergency management from Delaware County Community College. He's a member of our bike squad, and he was promoted to a Class A officer in 2016. Some of the awards Bill's received are life-saving commendations, including extricating an unconscious subject from an overturned burning vehicle in February of 2018, and also the cardiac arrest save of an individual in 2018 of an 80-year-old male that he was able to save and bring back. Bill does a great job with our police summer camp. His day-to-day contributions as a supervisor and also everything he does with the community is outstanding. Bill, thank you for your service. Congratulations. Just real quick, also in 2020, Lieutenant Moyer, who's up front, once again, I was told not to do it, but I have to. Lieutenant Moyer was promoted from sergeant to lieutenant. He's doing an outstanding job for the community. He's helping us to move towards our accreditation process. He's really pushing the policies out, working with the officers to try and find and develop policies and practices for us to better ourselves and reach that accreditation credential. But thank you for your help, your service, and you're doing a great job. Thank you. In December of 2020, we brought on Joseph Jonas. I saw him there. And I was also told not to do this, but I'm going to do it. We had an opportunity. We had two detectives that retire in and about a short period of time, and we had to do a detective promotion, which is it's important. It's crucial to our overall operations. Two of our corporals competed with other individuals from the department, and they all did excellent. Corporal Mike Sermignano and Corporal Tom Sparlock both received their appointments to detectives, and that was effective January 16th of 2021. And they're doing a fabulous job. The cases are clearing. They're working with their current detectives, and they're doing an outstanding job. Thanks for what you guys do. And if this time I have Corporal Eric Mioli, and if Eric's here, Eric's in the back. Unfortunately, he's working night shift. I think he just came in. His family couldn't make it, but Eric was promoted to corporal in 2021, April. He's a 6-year veteran of the department. Gets involved with many of our community programs. He's also a member of the Honor Guard and the Chester County Emergency Response Team. And since his appointment, he's been doing an awesome job for us, and I can't thank you enough. Congratulations on your corporal promotion. And if I could have Corporal Russ Hiddle stop up. I think Russ is here. If your family's here, please have. With Russ today is his wife Shannon, Hunter, Jocelyn, and Seth. Austin, another son, is away in Florida playing lacrosse, enjoying the warmer weather. Congratulations to Austin. But, all right. Russ is a 21-year veteran of the department. He's a member of the Chester County Drug Task Force. A lot of experience in teaching or doing drug interdictions and gang investigations, but also instructing for our region on how to accomplish those investigations. Russ is doing an outstanding job with his platoon. He's a true leader, and congratulations on your appointment to Corporal. Thank you. And if I could bring up one more individual who's become a big fixture of this department, I'd like to have Scott, come on up here. In April of 2021, I asked Scott Dorsey to become our chaplain for our department. Scott took on that assignment. He stops in the building pretty much during the week, at least 3 or 4 times a week, to check on the officers, to see how they're doing, to see what we need, and see what we can do better for the community. I can't thank him enough for his friendship, his mentorship, and his leadership, and I know the officers appreciate what you do. Thank you, sir. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, you're good.
So, Madam Chair, Chief,
Thank you. Sorry, thanks for coming. Thanks,
Chief, my one takeaway from tonight, aside from the fact that I think we have the best police department in the Commonwealth, if not the country, is that I should never waste my breath telling you not to do something.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who was acknowledged tonight. We're very happy that you're a part of our police department, and thank you for all that you do to keep our community safe. All right, we can relieve everyone here, and we will move on to our announcements. I'll wait just a minute. All right. The Board of Supervisors will hold 2 special meetings to discuss the presentation of long-term strategic funding options on March 7th and April 4th from 7 to 9 p.m. All are encouraged to attend. If you are unable to attend in person, you can participate by Zoom, and the meeting will be broadcast on TTTV and YouTube. You may also comment by email at ttbosmeeting@tredyffrin.org by 4 p.m. the day of the meeting. 2 public information sessions are also scheduled on March 15th at the Township Building to review 2 stormwater projects scheduled in 2022. 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., Stratford Park Stormwater Basin Expansion, MS4. 7:15 to 8:15 p.m., Woodcrest, Willis, and Upper Weedley Roads Stormwater Improvement. There is a vacancy on the Planning Commission and 2 vacancies on the Park and Recreation Board. If you are interested in volunteering to serve, please send a letter of interest and brief resume to tredyffrin@tredyffrin.org. And finally, starting on Tuesday, March 8th, Thomas Road between Walker and Gulf Roads will be detoured as part of the Turnpike Milepost 324 to 326 project. More information can be found on the Township website. We move to the approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 18th, 2022 public meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We now move to Township business. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. We move to Supervisor Liaison reports. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you very much. The Planning Commission met twice since our last meeting. At our first meeting on the 20th, it was an organization meeting. They elected Mr. Growney as chair, Mr. Thomas as vice chair, and Ms. Snyder as liaison to the EAC for 2022. They approved the 2021 Subdivision and Land Development Activities Report, which we'll see tonight. And they had a discussion about the Delaware Valley Friends School. They presented a sketch plan and application. They're on East Central Road, Avenue, I should say. They had 23,000 square feet, consisting of a gym, 2 classroom additions, and an administration building addition, plus 36 additional parking spaces. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend granting those requests and recommended it to the Zoning Board. They met again on the 17th to discuss the Valley Hills proposed development. That's along 252 near East Central Avenue. A lot of questions during that meeting, and basically the developer is going to go back and answer those questions and should be back to the Planning Commission in the future. The next meeting is the 17th of March at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Humble.
Thank you. The Parks and Recreation Board met on February 9th, and amongst the discussions were the present vacancies. The board did hear from and interview an applicant, Diane Van Maal, and they really liked her, and they have moved to push her forward to the Board of Supervisors for consideration. Additionally, we talked about the final form of the year-end report for 2021 that the Parks and Rec Board will be putting forward to the Board of Supervisors. And number 3 was a bigger item in which the board began discussions of possible uses of the fees in lieu that are coming to the township from the construction project going on at the corner of Sweetsford Road and Contention Lane. While we discussed some possible uses, the board ultimately decided that it's better to go out to the residents of the neighborhood that's right there, because the two parks that would benefit from these fees in lieu are Tea Garden Park and D'Ambrosia Park. So ultimately, the board chairman appointed a subcommittee to reach out to the neighbors there and ask their opinions about what they might like to see improved in Tea Garden Park and in D'Ambrosia Park. So the members of the subcommittee are myself, Jamie Godfrey, and Jack Trimmer, as we all live in this same neighborhood. So we're just getting started to reach out to the neighbors, and it all looks very exciting from the first look ideas that people are throwing around. So that's all for my report on Parks and Recreation. As goes the school board, TE School Board did start this week of going mask optional within the school for the students and the teachers. So I will leave it at that, and I have no report for the Parks and Rec Foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Okay, folks, the zoning hearing board met 3 times since the date of the meeting of the last Board of Supervisors. There was a special meeting on January 26 and 2 regular meetings on January 27 and February 24. So bear with me. At the January 26th special meeting, the board heard additional testimony in the validity challenge continued from December 9 and January 4 of applicant Finery LLC and Greenbridge Development to the Rural Conservation District zoning designation applicable to the picket post property, 355 Chase Road, Chesterbrook. Tredyffrin Township is opposing the challenge and defending this rural conservation zoning designation. This hearing was further continued until Thursday, March 10 at 6 p.m. The next, at its January 27 regular meeting, the zoning hearing board heard the following 5 appeals and announced 2 decisions that evening. At its February 24 meeting, the board announced the remaining 3 decisions. I will indicate all decisions after summarizing each appeal. First, the board heard and at its January 27th meeting, approved the request for a 1-year extension of the application of Devon Prep for a special exception to extend the non-conforming use by construction of an indoor practice facility. Second, the board announced that the application regarding 775 West Wind Drive, Berwyn, in an R1 residential district for a variance to operate an Airbnb/VRBO short-term rental unit on the property had been continued indefinitely. Third, the board heard the application of Delaware Valley Friends School, 19 East Central Avenue, Paoli, PA, for a special exception to permit the expansion of the legally existing non-conforming use school building. 2, for a variance to permit a new non-residential building of not more than 10,000 square feet. And 3, for multiple variances to permit the expansion of the school's parking lot. And 4, several variances to permit on several campus buildings facades that would not comply with ordinances. At its February 24th meeting, the zoning hearing board announced that the school's application was approved, subject to conditions relating, among other things, to stormwater ordinance compliance, the conduct of a traffic study to control possible congestion on East Central Avenue, and the preservation of trees. Lastly, at the January 27 meeting, the board considered 3 residential variance applications, announcing decisions at its February 24 meeting as follows. First, denying 1 application for the purpose of constructing a swimming pool and pool area and requesting, among other things, a variance for increased impervious coverage of approximately 38%, where 30% is permitted. That application was denied. Second, approving 2 separate applications for setback variances to permit the construction of 2-car garages. Now on to the February 24th meeting. of the Zoning Hearing Board. First, the board granted the request of 675 Sweetsford Road for a 18-month extension of its application for a variance to permit a smaller screening wall for the parking garage. Second, continued until the board's meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board's meeting of March 24, the application regarding 1509 LaBoudier Road, Malvern, for setback variances in 2 proposed lots to permit the subdivision of the existing lot into 2 lots with existing structures. Third, the application regarding 371 Prussian Lane for Wayne for a variance to allow a proposed pool area and pavilion to be located between the house and the street line. Decision will be announced at the March 24 meeting. Lastly, the application of Echo Realty, 450 Sweetsford Road, for a variance to install a 68 square foot, and that is incorrectly stated as 80.4 square foot in the agenda, a 68 square foot wall sign where 40 square feet is the maximum allowed. For location reference for everybody, this sign would be for an indoor soccer training facility operated by Total Soccer Experience. It's near the Golf Galaxy. That decision will be announced at the ZHB March 24 meeting. There will be a special meeting of the ZHB on March 10 at 6 p.m. regarding 355 Chase Road, the picket post property. The next regular meeting of the ZHB is on March 24 at 7 p.m. I'm not done yet. I'm done with the ZHB. I'm moving on now to the Historical Commission. The Historical Commission met on February 16th. The meeting focused on Historical Commission projects for 2022, among them being a Chester County Town Walk in Tredyffrin Township from General Lafayette's headquarters in Valley Forge National Historical Park to the Jones Log Barn Living History Museum adjacent to the Duper Tie House. That's tentatively set for 5 to 7 p.m. on July 28th. Details later this spring and summer. Various municipalities in Chester County have these town walks, and I believe, to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief, this will be the first one in Tredyffrin. Next, the Historical Commission discussed a preservation plan update, including update of the Township's Historic Resources Survey, continuing review of the Historic Resource Overlay District Ordinance, exploring state funding for additional projects, and based on the Historical Commission having achieved a certified local government designation for Tredyffrin Township. And that's how we might be able to get funds from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. 3, another focus was increased public outreach through social media and public events. Again, another focus, working with Conestoga High School spring senior internships to participate in Historical Commission activities and projects. And lastly, but not least, is integration with other township commissions and boards on issues that may overlap. I think that has already started with this Historical Commission and EAC and others. Lastly, the Historical Commission will be presenting its year-end report at the March Board of Supervisors meeting. The next meeting of the Historical Commission is on March 16th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Freed.
I have no reports, and thank Supervisor Wysocki for covering the Historical Commission for me.
Supervisor Basker.
Thank you. So, in doing these liaison reports, by the way, one of the challenges is always figuring out the right level of detail. So I'm not quite sure what people are interested in, but, I go back and try and figure out what the right thing is. So if anyone wants to hear more in future reports, please speak up. If you want to hear less, let me know. So the Library Board of Trustees met on January 27th. The meeting for February 24th was cancelled for lack of a quorum because some members were traveling and other members had concerns about the weather. At the January meeting, Anthony Ferris was re-elected as the president of the Library Board of Trustees, and Johanna Paciolo was re-elected the secretary, and Matt Holt was unanimously nominated to the Library Foundation Board. So at this time, I would like to make a motion, because the appointment of Matt Holt needs to be confirmed by the Board of Supervisors. So I'd like to make a motion for Matt Holt to be appointed to the Library Foundation Board.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Supervisor Holt, who is enjoying a vacation right now with his family. Okay, do you have more? Supervisor Basker?
So, I'm sorry? Okay. So anyway, yeah, actually, Matt Holt had said that his vacation had been planned 6 months ago, so it's not that he decided to stay away today. So the Library Board of Trustees, the annual report is out, and what I will do is just read the summary of the report, and hopefully that gives you some idea of what's going on. So it says, "Dear friends, as you know, 2021 was a year of challenges that also presented new opportunities. Our librarians and staff continued to provide exceptional in-person library services, re-envisioning traditional offerings while exploring technologies that promote community interaction. The libraries continued to increase offerings of e-materials such as e-books and e-magazines while maintaining an up-to-date, exceptional print collection. Most programs and events remained virtual, and take-home kits were used for synchronous and asynchronous creative activities to connect community members of all ages. As we transition to more in-person services and programs, we continue virtual access initiatives to enable individuals that are unable to visit the libraries in person to participate. Readership of our newsletter is up, and visits to our buildings increased by 20% compared to 2020. In 2021, we were glad to be able to host our second charity golf classic. Our donors provided extraordinary support that will allow exciting developments in 2022, including a revamp of another public space at Tredyffrin Public Library to increase usability, more museum passes for Paoli Libraries collection, a new and improved ESL program, and an exciting library-wide dive into reimagined classics, supported by the Pennsylvania Humanities Council and our own Friends of Tredyffrin Public Library. We are exceptionally grateful to you, our community. And that's signed by Anthony Ferris, Board of Trustees, James Kim, Library Foundation, and Chris Kibler, Library Director. Now, there was also a very successful book sale by Red Fox. They basically take donations of books and fund the library with that. And they also needed a little bit more space, so they've been talking with the Township staff, in particular with Aaron, about the possibility of putting a shed on the premises for storing the materials. So that's it for the Library Board of Trustees. This year I also took on the role of the Board of Supervisors liaison to the Environmental Advisory Council, and I have to say that is really active. I attended one of the meetings and there was so much energy at that meeting. And in fact, we have a presentation today by Rutger Boraba of the EAC on the transition to clean energy, and this will be the first part of that, and it's further down in the agenda, so we'll get to that. And this is about where we are today. And I invite you to come back to our next meeting where she'll talk about the path ahead. And then we also had a very successful cleanup of Sweetsford Road between West Valley Road and Valley Road. And I don't know if any of you had driven by there, but there was a whole lot of trash out there. We had about 50 volunteers, and this was on Saturday, February 19th. And we picked up an estimated 25 tons of trash. We didn't actually weigh it, but just estimating by 50 pounds per bag, and we actually filled up dump trucks whose normal carrying capacity is 60 tons. So that gives you an idea of what we picked up, and there was just all kinds of stuff there. At the meeting, there was a discussion with the Trout Creek Watershed Resident Association about a cleanup event behind Gateway Shopping Center. It is proposed for March 19th. There's a Krabby Creek enclosure removal plan with Valley Forge Trout Unlimited, Saturday, March 26th. That's from 9 to 10:30 with the rain date of Sunday, March 27th, and that's for adults and high school students. They're looking into Earth Day projects for Saturday, April 23rd at Wilson Farm Park, tree planting, weeding, and activities for younger children as well. And they're thinking about Arbor Day projects. That would be Friday, April 29th to Saturday, April 30th, again at Wilson Farm Park. So these are things that are being discussed. There is an EAC newsletter which is on the EAC webpage under EAC newsletters. And we need to think about how to get greater visibility of that. So, right now it's on the webpage somewhere. We'd just like to find more ways of getting it out to people. And the next edition is going to be on how trees aid stormwater management. And the goal is to keep this to 5 pages. There are possible EAC internship opportunities for Conestoga High School students. So that has been promoted to them, so we look forward to that. And then with regard to the traffic committee, the next traffic committee is Wednesday, March 16th at 7:30 a.m. So, please bring your concerns to the traffic committee at that time. And with that, thank you, Dr. Gussie.
Thank you. We will now move to a presentation of long-term strategic funding options. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'll present my findings on strategic funding options for the township. Just a quick review of what I've been working on over the last couple of months. It started out as really a research into finding funding strategies for stormwater, which includes, infrastructure, flood reduction, MS4. That seemed to be the absolute number one priority of the board. And so as I started looking into things and having different conversations with the board, one of the things that kept coming up was, we have other funding priorities and obligations, not just, currently, but in the short term, midterm, and long term. And so, we're at a crossroads where right now is probably the best time to look at not just, again, our desire and want to solve stormwater-related issues, but also other issues that the township is facing. And so again, I worked, with the board, getting different priorities, and number one obviously was stormwater. And so, one of the things that, one of the questions I was asked of the board was, what do we think we need to tackle our stormwater problems? So again, that would be storm response, it would be infrastructure replacement, flood reduction, and all the requirements under MS4. And so, working with staff, we are estimating that, just our operating budget alone for this potential fund or department would need about $350,000. So that's going to handle, again, your day-to-day repair and maintenance of inlets, of small minor repairs for pipe, those type of things. Salaries and benefits of 7.5 employees, so breaking that down, this assumes a stormwater fund or department, creating that the half of employee would be a foreman. So we would split this foreman between stormwater and, sanitary and stormwater. We would hire 4 laborers or senior operators for Public Works, 2 of which are going to be in street sweepers essentially around the clock. 2 more we would hire to operate the recently purchased vac truck. So again, part of the MS4 program is cleaning out the inlet, so that's why we purchased, part of the reason why we purchased the vac truck. So 2 people to work that as well. With a stormwater management fee potential, I would need to hire an additional staff member for the finance department. And then in engineering, we would bring on 2 employees, one as an inspector and one as a project manager. Moving into capital for this potential program, we're looking at the need for $2.1 million. $450,000 a year for engineering and design, $900,000 a year that would go towards flood reduction and MS4 projects, so realistically, again, about $450,000 each. And then a large chunk, $750,000 for infrastructure replacement. So one of the things that we're doing this year that we haven't done necessarily in past years is we're trying to become more proactive with replacing rotted pipe throughout the township. And so what the infrastructure replacement is really focused on that, is going into our streets, tying it into our Super Pave program, where we'd replace that infrastructure before we repave the road. It would allow us to look at all of our inlets and repair or replace all the inlets, again, tying it in with our street program. And so, it's very costly, but one of the things that we're trying to implement with this program is that by identifying sections, different roads, different lengths of pipe, we gain an economy of scale. And so that's the best way to maximize the dollars. So we're estimating, given feedback from the board, from the Stormwater Task Force, and from staff, we're estimating the need for $3.25 million a year. Now, and I'll get into this a little bit, but this number obviously can fluctuate, and it's really going to depend on what our expectation is in terms of getting projects done, but as well as the level of service that we'd be offering. Some of the other future funding priorities / obligations that I heard about were, the police department funding. That could include, I heard from supervisors, potentially adding some additional staffing to the police department, as well as making sure that, they continue to be well equipped and ready to perform their job. We have a lot of infrastructure and operating needs for our 3 fire companies, and so, again, making sure that they're well-funded and ready to serve the township is also high on the list of things that the board wants to fund. Capital reserves. So right now, we're looking in our capital plan, our project capital plan, about $9.5 million of unfunded projects. Most of that's going to be related to stormwater, but still we have a large amount of unfunded identified projects. We also have an additional, I think it's $2.3 million identified in equipment, machinery and equipment that needs to be, that's identified in the next 5 years. And so we have a large amount of capital needs just in the next 5 period, next 5 years alone. Something that we've been, I think, on the leading edge of as it is, but we continue to stress the importance of, funding our other post-employment benefits, our OPEB trust, and tackling our liability there. So we'll be getting a new valuation report this year, but as of the last valuation report, our liability sits at around $17 million. And so by funding that liability, we would be able to significantly reduce and offset our needs in the operating budget. So that, again, right now, we're sitting at over $1 million deficit, in the budget, would help fill that hole. And then pension stabilization. One of the things that, it's not unique to Tredyffrin, but it affects a lot of municipalities, is the fluctuation in our minimum municipal obligation, our MMO, especially to our police pension. So when the markets are great, as they have been the last couple of years, and you hit a valuation date, you capture that. It's a snapshot in time. It's a 2-year period. So good markets mean our MMO goes down. You have one bad year, you could have one bad quarter, and it could greatly affect your MMO. And so one of the things that we've talked about is trying to establish a stabilization trust or fund, which would allow the township to keep our budget for the MMO level. And in good years, again, there's really nothing to do, but in those bad years when you have a down valuation, which hits you for 2 years, you can take money from this while not affecting your operating budget, which could, as we've seen in the last couple of years, there's a potential for a $400,000 to $500,000 swing in any given year. And so, just working towards that. So how do we fund everything? Really identified 4 potential avenues: general obligation bonds, earned income tax, stormwater management fee, and the sale of the sewer system. I'll start with bonds. Again, even with interest rates climbing recently, relatively low cost. 20-year bond would cost the township $69,000 for every $1 million that we issued. So for a $10 million issuance, that would be debt service of $690,000 a year. 25-year bonds, slightly less. Again, relatively low interest rates still, good environment for that. But when I took a step back and dove into this a little bit deeper, the concern that I would have, and I think the limitation in issuing bonds is you really need to identify shovel-ready projects in order to meet the statutory deadlines when you issue tax-exempt bonds. And so that's part of the limitation. Another one, again, I think it would be cost prohibitive as a standalone option because, again, for a 20 or a 25-year bond, you need at least $600,000 a year. And so what that would generally require is an increase in taxes to cover that bond cost. So that's one of the issues. And then again, the other issue is, we would probably need multiple issuances every few years. So again, traditionally speaking, this township has rarely used debt as a way to fund our capital. We recently did it in 2019, and again, we've been successful with that, but we generally don't do it as often as other municipalities, and that's for a reason, because the impact on real estate taxes. Earned income tax. So the positives about an earned income tax are it's a reliable stream of revenue. It has theoretically growth built into it. In 2020, Keystone and Berkheimer, so those are the two main tax collection groups for the state. They handle, all the surrounding areas. Keystone collects for Chester County, Berkheimer collects for Montgomery County. And so I asked them, what are our residents already paying? So as of 2020, they were paying, essentially $5.7 million. So my next step was, how do I figure out what the impact would be on those who are not paying? And so Keystone and Berkheimer were able to provide me that 6,300 residents are currently paying the EIT. The labor force, we estimate to be, 15,700 people. I tried to figure out, again, and this is an estimation, but I've tried to figure out how many people work in the city of Philadelphia. And so I asked Keystone and Berkheimer if they had that number. They don't. The only way you would get a true number is by enacting an EIT, and then you get those numbers because on their returns every year, you indicate if you work in this city. So I emailed I emailed some of my counterparts in other municipalities and asked them, do any of you have this information? The only municipality that had any information was Westtown. They had a little over 300 people that worked in the city, and so the way I came up with 1,000 people was, we're a little bit closer to the city, obviously, than Westtown. We're about 3 times the size of them. So again, it's not necessarily scientific, but for all intents and purposes, I'm estimating it to be about 1,000 people. So again, who does this impact? This has a potential to impact 8,400 people. And the way I backed into what I think the estimated revenue is again, I went into the census data. Our per capita income is just about $72,000. Our median income, household income is $136,000. So the issue, one of the biggest issues with an earned income tax is that for 8,400 people, it's at least a $700 hit. But for the medium household, it's a $1,400 hit. And so when we're looking at this as an option, this is by far going to have the largest dollar impact on people. And so that's obviously one of the biggest concerns that we have, is that, again, when we're looking at adopting and selecting an alternative, we're trying to do this in the most economical way and have the least amount of impact for our residents. And I think this is going to have one of the largest, if not the largest, impact. And so that's one of the concerns, obviously. The other one is the school district's going to take half of the money. We do all the work. They get half the money. And so that's another one of the issues. But I think from a dollars and cents standpoint, the biggest driver here, and the thing I want to take the board to take away, is that this is going to have a very high impact on people. Stormwater management fee. So I'm talking with Mr. Burgo. I think under I'll call it the best case scenario, we're estimating 18 to 24 months to fully implement this plan. And by that I mean, writing the ordinance, working through all that, working through setting up the revenue and that. And so I think that's a fast track, but I think, again, knowing Steve, he would get it done. One of the things that we would need to do is hire an engineering firm to study the township. So we'll need this is obviously going to be one of the most important steps. It's going to help determine the fee structure. So looking at some of our other municipalities around us, there's a plethora of options and ways you can break this fee down. You could do it simply on impervious coverage. You could do it on parcel size, or what we've seen is a lot of blending, where you take both parcel size and impervious coverage, and you work it into an equation. While we are having, while one of the engineering firms is out studying the township, a lot of that work will be done LiDAR, so it doesn't take. Hopefully, that's a pretty streamlined process, but still, a lot of work to there. The board will need to work on an ordinance. And so, a couple of the things that we'll have to work through, and it's not a complete list, obviously, but, just some of the big things that we'll have to overcome and work through are, how do we handle existing improvements? The one I always use when I think about this is Wayne Glen and the regional basin. Again, they were required to build the basin as part of the project. They were required to handle all the stormwater the way they did as part of the approval process. But again, how do we want to handle that? They pay a lot of money to do that now. Is the township going to charge them on top of that. Again, another one is the potential impact on our tax exempt entities. Right now, they don't pay real estate tax, but this would apply theoretically to tax exempt entities. The biggest one that we really have here is our school district. And so that's going to have a pretty large impact on the school district, and I would expect them to probably offer some sentiment on that, but it's, again, something we'll have to deal with. And then again, just as a reminder, we envision, again, the part of the reason we would potentially enact a stormwater management fee is to entice residents to, install stormwater management control features on their properties. And so, again, we would offer no offset or credit to the fee when stormwater is required. So again, if you're building a big addition on your house, and you use 600-foot addition, you're required to do stormwater. It's not going to reduce your management fee. And then, one of the biggest things that we really, again, have to consider and think about, and because it's such a change it would be a change in our policy, is what is our policy on our orphaned infrastructure? So those are as you guys know, are the emails and the calls that you guys get about pipe that runs through my yard. I don't know, this isn't mine. Those are the type of answers that we'll have to come up with. So revenue considerations, post-engineering study. So as, again, that's an estimate, and one of the questions that I got was how much is the fee going to be? What do we estimate the fee going to be? And so one of the things that we have to think about as we move through this is, again, consider that, level of service and expectation. We can bring down those capital numbers if we wanted to go, make sure we reduce the size of the fee that we need and the revenue that we need. We could reduce capital as one area. But again, it's managing the expectations of how many projects we're going to get done with the dollars that we have available. What I presented for dollars, the idea would be that as we complete the engineering and design of one project, you have the budget and the funds available to move on to your next one. And the same thing with infrastructure and everything else. Is the idea is to just keep things moving forward. Again, I think given our bandwidth and just the limitations that we're facing, I think we have to really take a step back and think about how many projects we can really get done in a year. So many municipalities get bogged down in talking about projects and wanting to do projects. I feel like we have such a tremendous track record of actually going out and getting things done, and we want to continue that, and we want to be successful. So again, that's a conversation that we'll have to have with the board and obviously with the public in general. And so it's just something to keep there. We're going to want to consider our future needs to avoid raising rates in the short midterm. Again, if we move down this road, I'm not saying we'll never have to raise fees, but the idea is let's set a fee that's reasonable so that way we know our operating and our capital needs are going to be covered, at least for the, in the 5 to 10 year period. And so that's just something. And then again, we have a lot to consider. We have our MS4 program. We have our flood reduction needs, our infrastructure, and again, as we've seen in the last couple of years, we need funds available to handle storm damage response. Last year was a perfect example of that and how we have those funds available to immediately get out and respond to a washed out road, replacing pipe. And so that's going to be paramount. And that's why I said, I think if we move down this road, I would consider issuing a bond in the early stages to help manage that cash flow. I think that's how we've really implemented our bond usages, and so I think this would be a perfect area to do that. And again, we would be able to build that estimated debt service into our consideration when we're building out our fee. structure. One of the positives to a stormwater management fee is we would estimate that it would save about $200,000 in the general fund operating budget. So right now we have a department in the general fund budget that handles stormwater. We'd be able to shift some of those dollars into this newly created department. And so getting the big question is, what is the impact on, the average homeowner or whatever? And so working with a lot of the information that the Stormwater Task Force provided, and especially Supervisor Gussie, we were able to estimate that the impact to a property with about 5,000 feet of impervious coverage would be $226. And the way we got to that number is we looked at Radnor's fee structure of $29 for every 1,500 square feet of impervious coverage. We need we have 1.3 times more impervious coverage than they do. And we need 3.1 times more revenue than they're raising. And so we figured it out and we backed into the number that it would be $226. So, again, early on I was asked, what do I think it was going to be? And I think, I was up front and said, realistically, I was thinking $250 just based off of what our sewer fund raises every year, which is a little over $4 million, and how this would impact. And so that came in that range. But again, we won't know what the actual number is until we do the study. We really, focus and potentially trim down our operating or capital needs and hit that final number. The last avenue which I looked into is the potential sale of the sewer system. I'm estimating that to take approximately 18 months. Most of that time is just due to waiting for PUC approval. What we would do is draw upon our experience from the sale of Valley Creek. Myself, Mr. McKenna, and Mr. Martin lived through that. And so in that scenario, we know what to expect up front in terms of information that's needed. And so we would draw upon that, and again, we're estimating 18 months. That would potentially net enough funds to cover all the priorities we spoke about. And using some of my contacts, we could potentially expect a sales price of $75 million. And I'm saying net $50 million. So we would take, what I'm saying we would take is $25 million, establish a rate stabilization fund. So what that would do is, for all of our residents who are on sewer and paying that, they will have a subsidy for the next, what we're estimating to be, is 15 years. And then any of the other remaining cash that's in the sewer fund right now converts into general fund cash. What this does, it doesn't get us away from ever needing a stormwater management fee, but it allows us a lot more time to establish it. And so Steve's got a lot, obviously, on his plate as it is. This allows him just a little bit more time to focus on, one of the biggest tasks that he's going to have this year is starting to work on a master plan for stormwater projects. And so this allows him that time to focus on that, get it done. It allows the board more time to work through an ordinance and produce the best possible ordinance that we can. Excuse me. I'm estimating essentially $1 million potentially in the reduction of the general fund operating budget. Most of those savings, and I'll get into it, come from OPEB. So what would the township do with this much money? $78 million. So again, this $78 million, the way we backed in that number, cash on hand in the sewer fund right now is around, it fluctuates between $25, $30 million. You add that on top of the $50 million net from the sale. And so where would we put this? And one of the things that I kept getting feedback on was, again, how do we tackle our stormwater issues? And so, again, this is just an iteration. This is obviously subject to change should we move forward with this avenue. But we could theoretically cover our stormwater needs for essentially 15 years. So that the board and the township could subsidize the stormwater needs for 15 years with funding $48 million into that. Now, that doesn't even take into account, the additional time that you get for, investing the money and interest savings, or interest earnings, but just simple math is about 15 years. 16.5 million in the OPEB trust, so that's where the biggest savings for the township come into play in the general fund operating budget. Right now, our trust has a little over, and again, it fluctuates given the market right now, but at the time of this, it was about $12 million in that trust. $17 million left over in a liability. By funding that liability, we're able to now to start pulling money from that trust and offsetting our OPEB costs. So right now, we're in healthcare costs alone, it's about 1.2 million. On top of that, we have our OPEB contribution that we're making at 875,000. That can go away. Once you fund this, that goes away. On top of now being able to take money from the trust and offset some of those healthcare costs. And on top of that, the $200,000 that we talked about by moving stormwater out of the general fund. And so that's where the biggest impact comes from. Putting aside, some money again for the establishing a pension stabilization, setting aside $3.5 million for our fire company. So again, the boards are, already committed, a little over $3 million to Berwyn for their Bridge Avenue station. We expect to continue to work collaboratively with Easttown, and we're still exploring potentially a permanent structure for Berwyn for a substation. So this money could help fund that, as well as future operational needs of our fire companies. Taking $6.5 million and putting that in the capital reserve. So again, by pulling a lot of that stormwater money out of capital, 6.5 million covers us for at least the next, realistically, 5 to 10 years for capital needs. And then again, $48 million for stormwater and MS4. So just to get into the rate stabilization fund a little bit and how it works. So Aqua is in the process of acquiring Delcora. And so they are the ones that are kind of pioneering this process. And so I would, again, we would use that model as a rate stabilization. And so what that means is we would set up an irrevocable trust administered by the township. The utility bill, the utility company would calculate a normal quarterly bill, I think is how they handle. They would send that to PFM or, if we hired somebody else to review. That gets approved. The invoice that's sent to our residents and to their customers, our residents, shows the full bill, then it subtracts out the subsidy that they receive, and that's what they pay. And then the utility bill sends the trust one invoice that gets paid yearly or quarterly. Part of making it last so long would be building in small rate increases into the rate. And again, given where rates are right now, it would essentially last 15 years. Now, obviously, that's going to be highly dependent on utility rates. As they go for rate cases, that has the potential to reduce the time that the trust would last, but also how much of a subsidy. There's a lot of math that goes into that, but that's how the rate stabilization fund would work. Right now, I'll use Aqua as an example. Aqua's average sewer bill, they say to estimate using your water bill. So if your water bill is $70 a month, which I think is pretty average, it's about $800 a year for your sewer bill. So our rates right now are $250, as we know. And so there's a $550 gap between where we are today and where they are today. The good news is they can't just overnight go, from 250 to 800. It's going to take years. The OCA, Office of Consumer Advocate, is very active against the utility companies. But again, the rate increases that we'll get there over time is how it breaks down. And so, again, our rate's at $250 right now. I don't necessarily think it's going to stay at $250 forever. Our costs are increasing right now because we don't treat any of our own sewage. We're essentially a giant conveyance system. And so we have no control over the end cost. And so as the cost for treatment at Valley Forge Sewer Authority goes up, our costs go up. As it goes up in Upper Marion's two systems that we flow into, ours goes up. As RHM goes up, ours goes up. And so, we're potentially looking at the need for an increase in our sewer fee, in the near future. But as it stands right now, we're at $250, they're at $800. Things to think about if we move forward. One of the things that gives me some pause is that this is a one-time infusion, very large infusion of cash into the general fund. And so as a matter of, being stewards of public money, we would want to make sure that we, lock up that money as best as we can. It's hard to do, yes, but I think there's a lot of avenues to do that. And so that's just something to think about. The increased number of system purchases, by system I mean sewer systems, and I'll use Aqua as the example just because they bought Valley Creek and they do the water here. One of the things that I learned was that, yes, the smaller the rate base, the larger the impact. So as they bring on more systems, the impact on those rate increases becomes smaller because there's a larger base. The one thing that I've heard from just some of my contacts was them Aqua bringing on Delcora is going to be a game changer for them and for the sewer rate base because the Delcora sale will bring on 200,000 EDUs into that system. So again, pretty large base, and so that has the potential to really offset some of these large rate increases. And then again, the other thing to think about is that utilities seek and get a certain level of return on their infrastructure. So they're paid to put pipe in the ground. We are not. We do it as a matter of need, but we're not looking to earn money on replacing sewer or sewer lines. They are. Which obviously affects their rate cases at the PUC. So again, the positive and the feedback that I receive is that, while they go for, I think this rate increase that Aqua has right now at the PUC is somewhere in the 40s, they'll get, realistically, it'll settle with OCA for under 20. Again, it's still a large impact, but at the same time, the township in the future would have the ability to request essentially what's called essentially party status and try to fight an increase with the utility. But again, it's a somewhat tedious and uphill battle. So some important dates. Again, the board is going to have two special meetings on this topic alone. One next week and one on April 4th. And the feedback that I've received is that the board is looking to take action on this strategy, on these strategies at our regular April meeting. And so with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco, for your presentation. Tonight is the first step in the process to selecting a strategic funding option. As Mr. Draco noted, we'll have 2 special meetings on this topic, March 7th and April 4th, 7 to 9, both in Keene Hall. We strongly encourage the public to attend and participate in these meetings. And with our very full agenda tonight, we do ask that we focus our discussion on this topic at those designated meetings. We will now move on to a presentation of the environmental. If you have comments on the process, sure.
Good evening, my name is Mike Heberg. I'm a township resident. So I guess my first question is, and I have a lot of questions. Thank you, Joe, for your presentation, but I have a lot of questions on each of the slides. What's the format going to be of the meetings?
We're still figuring it out exactly, but it will be primarily a public comment session, like a 2-hour public comment session. We'll probably have limits, maybe 5 minutes for each comment, so that we can get as much in over that 2 hours. We also have an email address where people can email in. And they will be like a normal board meeting where it's hybrid. People can participate virtually. It will be broadcast on TV, on TTTV and YouTube.
Okay. So I'd like to echo your encouragement of people participating in this. I think that the board presented and Joe presented what are the board's priorities, and I think it's important for the community to weigh in on what their priorities are.
Yeah, I need to correct, that was staff's recommendations or a list of options from staff. That wasn't the board priorities. The board hasn't set its priorities yet. That's the purpose of these public meetings.
Okay, so that's, that's something that, that should be considered, not only the funding mechanism, but what's the money going to be spent on and what are the good uses for it. I mean, basically, in rough financial terms, I think what's been discussed is, a stormwater fee, which would be somewhere around $200 per year, which would address the stormwater priority, which I think it's pretty clear to almost everyone in the township that that's something that I think you all have heard again and again is important to members of the community, both those directly affected as well as their neighbors. Joe talked about the sale of the sewer system, which would bring in a one-time windfall to the township, which would, the sale some of the proceeds would be used to buffer the sticker shock of going from $250 a year to $800 or $900 or more. The average township resident pays $590 a year in township real estate taxes, and they pay $250 a year to the to the sewer fee. So they're paying $840 a year. A change in the rate of sewer from $250 to $800 or $900 would bump people up from paying $840 a year to the township to $1,400 or $1,500 a year. So a very major increase in the cost to our residents, at least those that are on the sewer system, to meet these priorities. And then the third alternative is an earned income tax, which would be a new tax on every township resident who is every working family who has earnings in the township that doesn't currently pay to another township, as well as a tax on people that do not live in Tredyffrin but work here. So people who live in Radnor, people who live in Lower Marion, people who live in Upper Marion, and other municipalities that do not have an earned income tax would pay a new tax, a new income tax on all of their earnings for the privilege of working in Tredyffrin, which obviously would also, impact the affordability as well as the attractiveness of our commercial real estate. So people will many people choose to locate their offices in Tredyffrin Township for the reason that I know that 5 or 6 years ago, when I served on the board, there was a study done by the Philadelphia Inquirer, and out of 350 municipalities in southeast Pennsylvania and South Jersey, Tredyffrin was among the most attractive 2 or 3 municipalities in the entire region from a tax standpoint for businesses. So that's a distinct advantage we have, the fact that we don't have an earned income tax. And the average, as Joe pointed out in his presentation, the average household income is $136,000, $137,000 per year. So that would be something like $1,400 of additional tax on every working family in the township that doesn't currently pay an EIT, and there are significant numbers. And by the way, you'd also get to fill out another tax return every April. I can't wait for that one. Clearly there's big dollars to be spent there, and the impact of that spending would fall a lot on some people and none on others, depending on which alternative you select. And some of the impacts would be, irrespective of really people's use of the service or their property or the size of their property. So, my message to the community is to get involved. I think this is one of the most consequential decisions that this township has made that I can ever remember. And I don't think anything is even close to this. I mean, we're talking tens of millions, approaching $100 million in a township that has an operating budget of a little over $20 million a year. So this is the biggest money by far that the township has ever spent, or raised, by the way. So you're looking at raising a lot of money. You're looking at establishing priorities. And I think it's important for the township residents to either come to these meetings, listen to these meetings, talk to your neighbors, try to get educated on what the alternatives are, because it's going to be an opportunity to not open what's this new stormwater fee that I didn't know about, or what's this earned income tax I didn't know about, or how come my utility bill just went from $250 a year to, my sewer bill went from $250 a year to $700 or $800 or whatever the number is. So, I think I commend you for doing this, but it's important to get people involved, get them out there and take their feedback, because I think that these are very big decisions, and the community needs to be fully aware of what the choices are and how the money is going to be raised and how it's going to be spent.
I completely agree, and we really do urge the public to come out. We have the 2 public meetings set aside just for this topic. We have an email. I don't know how that turned off. So we really do want people to come out and participate, and we'll have it available virtual as well for those meetings.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, and Mr. Heber, I agree both with your call for people to come out, as well as based on your comments and the criticisms and critique of the various options. And we can discuss this more at the special meetings. I tend to agree with your critique as well.
Yeah. Please don't keep it to a 5-minute limit.
Madam Chair.
Murph took more than 5 minutes on his liaison.
Madam Chair, yeah, I did, and I'm going to take a minute on this, maybe a little more. I'm going to take a positive. We want the public to be engaged. There's no question. And yes, Mr. Heberg, this is a decision, probably the biggest decision that I've seen here in my time, and I have a lot less time, however, than Paul Olson had. But in my time, it's the biggest decision I've seen. But you know what? I'm glad we're facing that decision, because we're doing pretty well with our dirt tax, as I call it. It's all real estate. It's all bricks and sticks and permits. But you can't go on forever with that, or you're going to be raising your taxes there. You got to look at alternatives, and that's what we're doing. We haven't made any choices. We've laid out, put some choices on the table, starting with bonds where you can use them in any situation, and our other alternatives. But these aren't board projected alternatives. We want the residents to participate in this, and then we'll make our decisions as we go from that after listening to the residents. But I'm just pleased that we're taking this initiative now and not ignoring the need for our stormwater needs, or our public safety needs going forward, or our pension needs going forward. And we'll come up with a good solution. We will. So I'm taking a positive view of all of this, that we've actually taken the initiative, and we are bringing this to the top, and we're going to look at this as well as discharging our day-to-day duties as the Board of Supervisors and working with staff. So thanks.
No, I appreciate that. And the other thing that you might want to include in the analysis is, okay, in order to do some of these things, what would it take in terms of a tax increase? You might give people, real estate tax increase. You might give people either sticker shock, or they might say, hey, you know what, that's a reasonable alternative, the use of reserves and real estate tax increases. I'm not suggesting that you hide anything under a bushel. What I'm suggesting is that might be another alternative to help people understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's certain things that you want to do, and a full look at the alternatives would include that as another alternative. So,
Yeah, Mr. Heber, that's a great point, and it sort of segues into one of the comments I was going to make is, we're talking to staff and putting out for the public to consider, we tried to come up with, I'll say all the options, but obviously it wasn't all the options. So there may be other options that come up in our discussion. Frankly, there were some options on here, I think you and I probably agree, that I would rather just not see. I'd rather hope that come off pretty quickly. That's just me. But we also didn't want to say, okay, well, let's not, consider something. We didn't want people to come back later and said, well, even if it's a bad idea, why didn't you put it on the list? Why didn't you think about it? Why didn't you consider it? So we put things out there, some good ideas, some that I would consider to be bad ideas, but they're ideas, and we'll discuss them, and hopefully we'll narrow it down. And as you said, I think you raise a very good point, which is maybe the alternative is to not do anything new and just deal with what we have. It's certainly an option.
thank you.
Thank
And
you.
actually, while we're talking about costs, I do have, you can't always measure cost in dollars. One of the things that I found really heartbreaking as a supervisor last year was going out to visit a family where they had a river of mud come down the hill, go through their first floor, the entire first floor of the house, fill the basement with mud, take their sliding door on the downhill side of the house and carry it down the hill. And, the house basically, they can't live there anymore. And the previous time, this is the second time the house had been flooded. It's been there since the 1930s. The last 5 years, the second time it's been flooded. And the previous time, they had to be rescued by the fire department from a second floor window. And they had a fire person carry their dog, on his shoulders. So you can't just measure things in terms of dollars. What we're trying to do is get things done so that we don't have to deal with this kind of heartbreak.
Supervisor Gussie, can I just ask a process question? So there's at least two things we need to talk about. One is the priorities, like how much money we need to raise. And then the other is then what method are we going to use? And I agree with some of the points that have been made that we tried to list everything. We missed like the obvious one, which is keep doing what we do, which seems like it was on the table because it always is. How do you want those comments to come back from residents? And what are you really asking residents to do? And the third piece is, how do people question the presentation? Because I personally have a lot of questions I'd like to ask, obviously not tonight. But how do you see this working? I'm just curious.
I think we can shape it how we want, but I think during those discussions, people are welcome to ask questions to the staff and to us, and we can answer them. I think we can focus both on priorities and the solutions. And I think people could, in the meantime, send comments in, starting now, to that email address, and we can start kind of thinking through things. But we're open to suggestions on how to handle
I'm
the
sort of
meeting
suggesting,
itself.
I'm sort of,
Yeah.
by my question, suggesting that we steer people to those topics. Like ask, how do you feel about what we should spend money on? What are your priorities as a resident? What do you think we should spend money on? And then how would you see funding that from these various ideas we have put out there? Just so people think about it in those kind of terms. Otherwise, we'll have a lot of people, I want everything but don't raise taxes, or the other way around. But we need to, I want to spend money on everything. So I think it's important to keep people focused a little bit.
Yeah.
So we get useful feedback. Because in the end, I think we do want to hear from as many people as possible. There's lots of great ideas out there.
Yep.
And in the end, and so we can make the best decision possible for the residents.
I agree. I'm going to just read out the email address again, ttbosmeeting@tredyffrin.org. So if you do have questions in the meantime, but I think that's right. Those are the two main things that we're asking of people. What are your priorities, and what do you think is the best solution to get there, and why? All right, I think at this point we will move on to our next presentation. Oh.
Just say one quick thing. Ray Clark, really about the process. Number one, to thank you for going about this in the way that you are, to take the needs so seriously, and to Joe for really priming the pump. Obviously, everybody's got a lot of questions, and I think this kind of material can be very helpful when you actually get into the meetings next week and the month after. One thing that I would find really useful would be a little more time spent on the business case for whoever is going to buy this sewer system. What are the assumptions they are making about how they are going to make money from this? And really be very explicit about the 250 going to 800 or whatever it is. Does that really explain how they can pay us $78 million for the sewer system? Just to be sure that we're really comfortable that we understand what that alternative is going to look like for the residents 10 years, 15 years, whatever out. So anyway, so thanks very much for organizing this process. It's really terrific. Thank you.
Ray, this is David. I would agree. We need to really tune up the assumptions in a lot of these, a lot of the presentations, so people really understand exactly the trade-offs they're making. Because that's one, especially, is very, very hard to believe that the rates don't. I mean, they're arguing for 8 or 9% return on capital right now. Maybe they get 7, but 7 on $100 million is 7 plus return of capital over whatever time period they're allowed to get their capital back. I mean, that's a lot more money than an $800 sewer bill, just to pick one example.
All right, we will move on at this point to our next presentation, which is a presentation of the Environmental Advisory Council Clean Energy Committee Energy Transition Plan. Rucker.
So thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you for inviting me to present the Clean Energy Transition Plan. My name is Rutger Boerema. I'm a member of the EAC, and I started attending the EAC in 2017. And there were very few people then, and there are a lot more people now, so which is great. So in the next 10 minutes, I will discuss part of this plan and mainly focus on the energy inventory and the steps the township has taken until recently. So in September 2018, the Board of Supervisors signed a clean energy resolution. To give this resolution substance, we decided to write a plan. So who are we? Amanda Lofty, she's not here, she works for the township. Jennifer Cox, who is there in the audience. Myself and Mary Westerveld until she moved to Massachusetts. We got the opportunity to join a consortium of 16 municipalities in the summer of 2020 and work on this project together. I've named the municipalities on that slide, and there are eight townships in Chester County, and we also share a border with Upper Merion in Delaware County. We used the Guide to Community Energy Strategic Planning from the Department of Energy to write our plan. The plan has a two-pronged approach. The first prong focuses on Tredyffrin Township government, and the second prong focuses on the changes every individual stakeholder in the township needs to make to move to a clean energy future. Stakeholders are schools, non-profit organizations, businesses, and individual residents. So the plan starts with an energy inventory for the township, followed by an energy inventory for the community. Based on these inventories, we make recommendations for the township and actions the Environmental Advisory Council and the TE Green Team can take. So let's start with the first prong, the township. Based on PICO energy bills of 6 months of 2019 and 6 months in 2020, we calculated the annual energy usage of the township. So as you can see on this slide, the township uses almost 2,000 megawatt hours of electricity on an annual basis, and that's the same as the electricity usage of 192 homes. For heating and cooling, the township uses 3.5 million cubic feet of natural gas. That number on the slide is not right. It's 3.5 million cubic feet. And that's equivalent to heating 58 residential homes. And lastly on the slide is the Tredyffrin vehicle fleet. And we use annually about 45,000 gallons of vehicle fuel. And if you average that, that we can drive about 25 miles per gallon, that means that we can drive almost 45 times around the globe. So when we translate the usage of the previous slides into emissions, we can see that vehicle fuels is the area which has the most impact on emissions. For the townships, that's 359 tons on an annual basis, with 27% of the total emissions in the government has, followed by the library building and then by the municipal building. So electrifying the township vehicle fleet will be a very important and impactful step to reduce our emissions. So moving away from fossil fuels is a process, and it won't happen overnight. So on this slide you see steps the township has already taken to reduce our emissions. The first step was in 2018 when the Board of Supervisors decided to join the regional streetlight procurement program to change their streetlights to LED streetlights. This was finished in the summer of 2020. And it is estimated that this reduces the township's greenhouse gas emissions by about 382 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And then when you look on the slide in 2022, a very important step the township is going to take in October of 2022 is change part of the electricity usage to renewable wind energy. So if we can combine clean energy electricity with a change to electric vehicle driving, we make this step even more impactful. And in the middle you see the awarded bronze SolSmart note. You can see that this was an award given by the US Department of Energy to recognize that the township has taken steps for easier permit application of solar on residential roofs. So moving on to our second prong of our approach, an energy inventory of the Tredyffrin community. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission started calculating energy usage, expenditures, and greenhouse gas emissions about 15 years ago, the first time over 2005. Since then, they have calculations for 2010 and 2015, and they are currently working on 2020 numbers. In our plan, we use 2010 and 2015 numbers. So if you want to look up the tool, you have to Google DVRPC, greenhouse gas emissions, and then you get to this map. It's a really cool map. And if you click on the municipality you're interested in, then you get a summary of the energy inventory of that particular township. So the DVRPC has divided the energy usage by sector, the commercial industrial sector, transportation sector, and residential sector. For Tredyffrin, you can see that the commercial and industrial sector and the transportation sector use up most of our energy. And that the residential sector uses about 1/5 of the total energy used. In 2015, we spent about $138 million on energy usage, and we use most of it for transportation, for driving our cars, and it's about 42% of our total energy expenditure. So in the next 3 slides, I will give you a breakdown of the residential energy usage, because as residents, this is the area which we can influence most. As individual households, we can make lots of changes, and I can testify that making these changes is very empowering. This slide shows the residential energy usage by source, so electricity, natural gas, fuel oil, and the light blue bar gives our total energy usage, and you can see on the dark blue bar that residents use mostly electricity. That's the largest category. When you compare 2015 with 2010, you can see that the electricity usage has gone down by 10%. And the DVRPC mentions that they think that this is due to more efficient appliances and efficient lighting. So the next slide shows a breakdown of the cost. So we spent most of our money on electricity. This also has gone down between 2015 and 2010 by 20%. So that's on one side is because we use less electricity. And on the other hand, the prices have dropped in that period as well. And then when you look at the residential emissions, that has gone down by 27%. So we see it drop from 126,000 tons of CO2 equivalent to 91,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. This is partly caused by the decrease of electricity usage, as we've seen in the other slides, and for a large part because there's less coal in the energy mix to produce electricity. So if we can generate more electricity via renewable sources, we can have a big impact on reducing our emissions. So we have similar breakdowns in the plan for commercial and industrial, and we also have a breakdown of the transportation sector in our plan. So to wrap this up, the township has taken impactful steps to reduce energy usage. The energy inventory of the township has helped to determine which areas have the greatest impact on reducing townships' emissions. With 27%, so that slide we had earlier, 27% or 359 tons of CO2 equivalent, the vehicle fleet had the biggest impact on emissions, and therefore electrifying the vehicle fleet will make a big impact, reducing emissions even further. The exploration and installation of solar to produce electricity on site will make this even better. It's an ongoing process, and we won't finish this overnight. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The energy profile for major stakeholders in the township, such as schools, non-profit organizations, businesses, and individual residents, are similar to the township's energy profile. This plan can help stakeholders understand how they can reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions. And as I mentioned earlier, that in 2015, we spent about $138 million on energy. Taking steps to reduce our emissions will also lower our annual expenditures as well. So, any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation and for all of your hard work on this plan. I know that you, Amanda Lotfi, Jennifer Cox, and previously Mary Westervelt have put countless hours into this, developing this plan, and we really appreciate it, and I look forward to the proposed path forward at the next board meeting. Any other board comment?
Well, I want to thank you also for sitting through the earlier part of this meeting. It took you a long time to, for us to get to your presentation, but thank you, and that is exactly what I expected.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, I just want to thank the EAC and Rutger and Jennifer, and you guys do tremendous work. I know it takes an awful lot of time, and really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that, again, I do appreciate everything you guys do. I mean, with the United Nations report that just came out on climate change, it's an important issue that we need to address. You sort of mentioned for a second there that going to clean energy is sort of fun too. I mean, I would say I would agree with that 100%. We went rooftop solar 100% at our house, and it's sort of fun to see I'm not emitting anything, it's sort of fun. So I would just tell people that it wasn't hard to do. It was very easy to get approved through the township, and it works great. So thank you.
Chair Gussie, I think the EAC knows how we feel about their work and how hard, what they're doing and the energy that's there, but just from my perspective, having sat up here for a little while over the years, to have an energetic, productive, exciting, focused EAC, it's really refreshing. And as Supervisor Miller mentioned, where we are with climate change, I know that the EAC will stay focused, and I just wanted to say that, so thanks.
Do we have any public comment tonight? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to...
Madam Chair, there is a hand up.
Mr. Hetzner, do you have a comment on the EAC's presentation?
Okay, it might be an error. I'll put them back in the queue.
Feel free to raise it back up if it was not an error. All right. All right, we will move on to the motion to adopt the 2021 Subdivision and Land Development Activities Report as required by the municipality's planning code. Ms. McPherson.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep it brief because we're already almost 2 hours in and we're only on D. So I did include a memo of the Planning Commission activities. Basically, to sum it up, there was 1 land development, 3 subdivisions, an ordinance amendment, and probably most importantly, the comp plan. So yeah, like you said in the motion, we are required by the MPC to adopt the activities report every year.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion?
The only comment I have is, Ms. McPherson, thank you for stepping in the way you stepped in. You're doing a terrific job, and thank you for the work you're doing with the Planning Commission and the Zoning Hearing Board and all the planning issues.
Do we have any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we move on to the motion to adopt Resolution 2022-7, approving as an update of the official plan of the Tredyffrin Township, the Act 537 plan update for the entire Delcora service area as prepared by Gannett Fleming, Inc. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Gussie and members of the board, this resolution for adoption from the Board of Supervisors, it's an update to the 537 plan and the township's official plan for the sanitary sewer that's handled in the RHM system, which feeds into Delcora. The township has a small amount of our southeastern portion of the township in Devon and in Stratford that feed into that Radnor-Haverford-Marple system. That goes down and is conveyed down into the Delcora system and is ultimately treated in the southwestern portion of Philadelphia. The plan updates looked at several alternatives. Gannett Fleming, the engineer for Delcora, recommended alternative 2, which includes a tunnel, creation of a tunnel, additional storage and conveyance, and upgrades to the Chester wastewater treatment plant that's currently controlled by Delcora over other options, and over the option to continue to go into the city of Philadelphia, which would need to have additional upgrades in the future, which are out of Delcora's control. The board is asked to approve this 537 plan, as well as all the municipalities that feed into the system have to review and approve it. And it was before the Planning Commission for discussion and comment at the February meeting, and the Planning Commission did provide a letter of recommendation to the board. We did discuss some comments they had. Brown and Caldwell, our sanitary sewer engineer, did review the plan and make their recommendation. And at this point, there's no additional costs, that are associated with this plan. It's really a 537 planning update, but there will be costs that the users through the system will have to fund for the improvements in the future.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any board discussion?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Burgo. And you sort of anticipated with your last comment, which is, do we have any sense of what those future costs are going to be and how they compare to other alternatives?
I don't know the exact nature of the cost of what they will be, but they will be, like, according to what Gannon Fleming has estimated, they feel that this option and these costs of doing the treatment in the Delcora system will be less than the uncontrolled cost if it's out of their hands, I guess, if they go into the Philadelphia treatment system. They can assess the users their fees, and really there's nothing you can do about it. So I think Delcora has evaluated it through Gannett Fleming. They feel that this option is the most economical for them to do, and for the users themselves.
All right, thank you.
Any other board comment? Any public comment? This one is a roll call vote. I will start on my right. Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki. Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Now we move on to the motion to ratify the Township Manager's execution of participation agreements for the county to receive the entire settlement from the opioid litigation against McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal Health, Inc., or Janssen Johnson & Johnson. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you rightly point out in the motion, this is to authorize and ratify my execution of agreement on behalf of Tredyffrin Township to participate with the county in terms of the national opioid settlement. Due to the timing of the requirement to get this filed with the county, it did match with our board meeting. However, we did get a sense of the board, which allowed me to sign that, and tonight we're going to ratify that commitment for the township. This will allow us to participate with the county when the funds become available for opioid projects they will use to deal with the issue facing the county. I believe the county should be receiving part of the settlement between $15 and $20 million. They will be setting up programs and working with police departments throughout the county to deal with the opioid crisis. So we want to be part of that program, and hoping you will ratify that tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? And as we move on to the vote, I will comment that I will be recused from this vote because my husband works for one of the companies in the settlement. So for the rest of the board, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to accept the second amendment to the Declaration of Amended Restrictions, Covenants, and Easements of Paoli Woods Homeowners Association. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a somewhat perfunctory act on behalf of the board. When the Paoli Woods Homeowners Association enacted its first amendment to the declaration of its amended restrictions in 2020, it added an easement for the township relative to the common open space. Essentially, it granted the township an easement to be in and around the common space and maintain it if the township so chooses. There's no obligation to do so, but it added that easement in there. It also added a provision that if the declarations for any reason were to be amended in the future, it was going to necessitate the township's approval. In this case, the amendments have nothing whatsoever to do with the easement itself. They were somewhat immaterial, frankly, to anything to do with the township. We reviewed it. We noted a couple of typos, but otherwise we had no objection whatsoever to the Second Amendment declaration, which is before you tonight.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to direct the Ordinance Development Subcommittee to begin work on short-term rental enforcement ordinance. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a follow-up of the board's approval of the public hearing to deal with the short-term rental issue, and as discussed at that public hearing was the commitment to look at the comments made by the public and the Planning Commission to make sure we can have the proper enforcement mechanisms and to review other options along with the short-term rental ordinance. Some of the preliminary work has already started, so tonight is just a formality to authorize us to begin work in diligence on that update to the ordinance. So happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize staff to advertise and receive bids for janitorial services. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Staff continues to receive multiple complaints about the cleanliness and overall performance of our current cleaners, both here at the Township Complex and at the library. Therefore, we're requesting authorization to advertise and receive bids for janitorial services via pen bid.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize the Township Solicitor and staff to prepare the necessary documents to vacate the remaining portion of Old Sweetsford Road. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was a request from the property owner, Justine Navarro, at 1250, well, I guess you'd call it 1250 Sweetsford Road. It was at the time known as Old Sweetsford Road. It's actually a portion of road that she utilizes as her driveway, a portion of which has already been vacated by the Township. It ran diagonally from 252 north to what is now Sweetsford Road, and when the intersection at that time, I think, was redone, the road was realigned, and that portion was turned over from PennDOT to the Township, and a portion that was turned over to the Township was vacated, but not all of it, and frankly, it's the portion that Ms. Navarro needs to access her property. I think she would like to sell her property, but since, frankly, the access is still owned by the Township, she would like to vacate it. The Township hasn't been maintaining it, is my understanding, for years. I think there was some confusion, perhaps even that thinking that they had taken the proper steps to vacate the road. That has not occurred from what we could find from staff had done the digging and the research. It's a bit of a more complicated process. We have to get a legal description and a plan for the area to be vacated. It has to be done via ordinance and notice to the property owner. So staff is recommending, unless the Township has any objection, to beginning that process and vacating the road.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to appoint a voting representative for the PSATS Annual Conference. Would anyone like to make a motion? I will make a motion to appoint Supervisor Freed as a voting representative for the PSATS Annual Conference. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
I think this is one of those situations where they say whoever wants to do it step forward and everyone else steps back. So.
Now we have a motion to approve a letter of funding commitment for the monetary match for a DEP Growing Greener Watershed Protection Grant for the Bear Road Trout Creek Infiltration Water Quality and Flood Mitigation Project. Mr. Burgo.
Madam Chair and members of the board, before you had a memo in your packet, I guess, going over the specific discussion. It's a funding letter commitment to DEP. As part of, I guess, let's go back in time, it's just now February. So at the beginning of February, the township was notified from DEP that we are going to receive $340,000 for a grant for stormwater for the Bear Road Stormwater Project. We had submitted that grant back in June of 2021, and we went through that process with DEP, and we're basically going to get a large chunk of money, which is fantastic. As part of the original project, the cost was estimated just under $700,000. We had put in for a large portion of that to be funded by the grant. The award of $340,000, although it be a lot of money, it's still less. It's about half of the cost of the project. We had committed an in-kind match originally, which was township staff time, a lot of my time, and some of our engineering department time for the project, as well as some money for the consultant to do the design work. DEP was going to fund the other portion of the project. So with the award, what we basically are looking at is DEP has asked us to fill out all the documents. We've submitted some of them so far, and this funding letter of commitment is the last item we have to submit to DEP. They want to make sure that there are funds available to do the entire project. Otherwise, we would have to rewrite the scope of work and basically go back to them to try to do a lesser project. We want to hopefully do the whole project. It would be good for that area of Contention Lane that has been experiencing a lot of stormwater problems. So what we have, we're asking for the township supervisors to commit with this funding letter of commitment to the remainder of money. It's an additional $235,880, which is basically 51% of the cost of the project. That being said, we are looking to other grant sources. So we've already reached out with Jacobs, and I have been working. We're looking into other state and county sources for additional grants. We found one that we might be able to get for 2023, which is good because that's when the construction ultimately would be for this project. So we are actively engaged with the county on some of the looking into that. It could fund a portion or even possibly up to that total amount if we're lucky. It depends on the availability of funds. And we're also looking at 2 other different grant sources that are state grants sources. So if we can piecemeal it and do a couple different sources of grants, we would do that. In the case we are successful, that would be fantastic. In the case we're not, DEP wants to make sure that the township is committed to providing the funding so we can do the whole entire project. So there is a summary included in that letter for $698,280, the total cost of the project. It kind of breaks down the original commitment of $122,400, partly cash money for the consultant, part of it for township in-kind match for staff time. The $235,880 is the additional amount we're asking the board to commit to so we can move forward with DEP on this grant.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. Any board discussion?
Yeah, so Mr. Berto, as I understand it, sort of, and bottom line is, at the very least, we're getting 49% of the money for the project, and hopefully between now and 2023, we're going to be able to come up with some more of the money.
That is certainly what we are looking to do. Yes, we're going to get that amount of money from DEP already, from this grant, and then we also have in-kind services. So there's about a $45,000 amount that would be in-kind services that we're not actually technically paying for. It's really staff time. And then the remainder we would be basically either paying for or finding grant dollars for.
Well, Mr. Berto, everyone knows you have a lot of free time on your hands. So.
Well, like we said, we're already working on. As soon as we found out that amount of money, we were already looking at 2 different grant sources. So we've already reached out, and we're going to be having meetings in April with at least one of those agencies to try to hopefully shrink that dollar amount down as small as we can. So we're on it.
Thank you. Any other board discussion?
Yes, I would really like to commend you, Mr. Burgo, for the work you've done on this project, and everybody else with the township who has worked hard on this and prioritized it to get attention sooner rather than later. I've viewed firsthand the damage that gets done downhill and downstream from this, and it's very much needed at this time. And so I just want to say thank you.
Thanks. Any other board comment? Any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-8, authorizing Township Manager to execute any documents required for the DEP Growing Greener Watershed Protection Grant for the Bear Road Trout Creek Infiltration, Water Quality, and Flood Mitigation Project. Mr. Burgo.
Madam Chair, members of the board, to be really brief, this document is not required at this point in time, but it will be later on for us to kind of execute the reimbursements for the grant. So we're just being proactive, and we're asking that the board approve authorizing the township manager to be able to execute those reimbursements and any and all signatures for the grant itself to complete it.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? And this one is a roll call vote. I will start with Supervisor Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Humboldt.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki. Aye. Supervisor Freed.
Aye.
Supervisor Basker.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize Township Manager to execute any documents required for the Growing Greener Green Garden Grant Program. Mr. Burgo.
Madam Chair and members of the board, once again, this is another basically request of the board to allow the township manager to execute the documents related to the second Growing Greener grant that was or will be coming to the township. This is for the rain garden program that the EAC submitted, and we're getting $12,000 for that as well. So it's just the same thing. It's more of a DEP formality, but making sure that we can execute all the documents and reimbursements we need to with the grant.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we move on to the motion to approve memorandum of agreement between Tredyffrin Township and the Tredyffrin Township Police Association. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tonight, I am very excited to present a contract extension with our police union, which will take us from January 1st of 2024 through December 31st of 2028. As I learned the other day from the union president, Mike Spirito, that this will actually be the longest contract in the state. And so we're very excited about that. This provides 3.5% increases annually for the police department. Another positive is that we've moved our starting salary up from $55,000 to $70,000 in an effort to be more competitive with surrounding municipalities. And so that was a positive. I think the biggest takeaway, though, for the township is for any officer hired after January 1 of this year, there will be no post-retirement medical benefits offered. This, in the long run, will save the township millions of dollars, and so we're very excited about that. It's something that Mr. Martin and I have been working on we've been here for about 10 years, so we've been working on it for that long. I can't thank, from the police department, Jim Slavin, Mike Spirito, Mike Sermignano, for working with us. Something started that we started late last year, really getting into it. But then also, can't thank Tyler Moyer and Tim Brown enough as well. They really helped pull this all together in the end and help us get to an agreement. So we're very excited about this and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion?
Madam Chair, Mr. Duraco, I want to thank you, and as you said, I want to thank the command staff as well as the police union. I know from experience in dealing with a number of these other municipalities and contracts that this certainly is both the longest and one of the most significant contracts that I've seen. I know it must have taken a lot of work on both sides and a lot of cooperation. I think, hopefully it's a win-win for everybody. And again, thank you and the union.
Madam Chair, real quick, want to follow Supervisor Freed's comments. We are lucky in terms of how this contract worked out. We're lucky to have a Tredyffrin Township Police Unit that was willing to sit down and negotiate in good faith over a number of months to try to get this accomplished, and that's really goes to Joe DeRocco's efforts in putting that together. I mean, he spent a lot of time back and forth, as you know, as contracts negotiations sometimes go. At the last minute, there might be hiccups, and to get this accomplished is quite an accomplishment for us. That we, like Mr. DeRocco mentioned, we've been kind of working on this, and I think again, thank the police union for understanding the township goals as long as protecting their own union membership. And I think it was great to get both parties across the finish line. So kudos to Mr. DeRocco for really spearheading that effort.
Madam Chair, I'd like to thank Bill and Joe, because the OPEB issue and dealing with it has been there forever, and you brought it across the finish line, and starting with January this year, we won't having to be dealing with that with new hires, and that's great. And the flip side is I think it's also great that you looked at salary and said, hey, wait a second. We do well. We hire some folks here, but maybe we missed some, and that came into it. And this is a good number. I mean, it's not overpaying for new officers. So, and also kudos to the Police Association for working through this with you, because in prior years, there was no working together on certainly this issue with OPEB. So thank you again, and congratulations on a great job.
And Madam Chairwoman, if I can just follow up on Mr. Wysocki reminded me of something. I think, as he said, the salary increase is significant. I think there was some question. I think Tredyffrin is a very desirable location, but there was some question about whether our starting salary was competitive. I think with this increase, it's going to allow us to continue to get the very best police candidates, which is going to be a benefit to the community.
Any other board discussion? Any public comment tonight? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize staff to advertise and receive bids for the 2022 Super Pave project. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Public Works Department is seeking the board's approval to receive bids for the 2022 Super Pave project. Although our paving list isn't complete, staff is looking to gain an efficiency within the program to best position the township for the paving program. It is our ultimate goal to begin the program right after school gets out in June and to wrap it up in the first part of September.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to approve emergency storm sewer repair on Hawthorne Place. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Public Works is requesting the board's approval to do an emergency storm pipe replacement under Hawthorne Place. There's a 60-inch storm pipe that runs under Hawthorne, just west of North Valley Road. The pipe is rotted to the point that it is collapsing on itself and provides the only access to the development. We have acquired the pipe and are using PJ Raleigh from Downingtown to do the repair. Horgan Tree will do the tree removal for the project. We estimate the repair is around $98,000. It'll take 3 to 4 weeks to complete.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to ratify purchase of Public Works truck. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Public Works is requesting the board's approval to purchase a F600 dump truck. This vehicle will replace a 2006 F550 dump truck. We've contacted numerous dealers to locate a truck, and we're recommending Stevenson Equipment from Harrisburg for this purchase. The total amount is $120,895. Even though the purchase is over the budgeted price, we will defer the purchase of one of the F-350 pickup trucks in order to stay within the Public Works vehicle budget for 2022.
Thank you.
Answer any questions.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. Any board discussion?
Madam Chairwoman, Mr. Fitzgerald, I know how hard you worked on trying to find this truck, and I do appreciate the deferral of the other truck to make sure we stay within budget.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any public comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize staff to advertise and receive bids for court resurfacing projects. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, we're looking for authorization to bid out the Tea Garden tennis courts, as well as the project in Mazie B, which includes the basketball price and the path. The board previously approved that project as a use of ARPA funds, and so that will cover the Mazie B portion. We want to bid this all out together again to maximize economy of scale and get the best price. We think it'll, it makes sense to have the same contractor do all three, and so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. Any board discussion?
Madam Chairwoman, I'm very excited about both projects. I know Mazie B, we have an awful lot of improvements that are planned there, and I'm very happy about that. Aside from the tennis court resurfacing and the trail, I know that there's also a pavilion in the works. So it's really great to see some improvements there.
Any other board comments? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to authorize purchase of police interview room equipment. Chief Beatty.
Thank you. Beginning in 2021, we identified that the police department has 2 interview rooms. Both are recorded. One is in the detention area, and one is also in the main police wing, which is used for victims and witnesses. The units that we had that have been in place for about 10 years are starting to fail, and we're not being able to be repaired. So we put on a capital line item 47-210. $25,000 was budgeted. Working with Mike Giasante, we identified vendors and we got quotes. The lowest quote is for a star witness interview system at a amount of $19,516.85, which is under the $25,000 which was budgeted, and that number is also $6,000 less than the other quotes that we received. Requesting approval to make this purchase and continue on the project.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, second.
Any board discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to consider and authorize advertisement of a public hearing, March 21st, 2022, for H.R. 448 to amend the Code of Tredyffrin Township, Chapter 35, Park and Recreation Board. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I might have some background with Mr. Duraco through this one as well. This item, as well as the one to follow, which is H.R. 449, were matters that came from Township staff for revisions to the Chapter 35 Park and Recreation Board. They were initially supplied in red lines as one document. We have broken them out into 2 proposed ordinance amendments consistent with the changes that the staff had requested after our review. The Chapter 35 changes were much more benign, I guess, in terms of the substance of the changes, although, again, I'll let staff delve into that a little bit more, and then we can talk about the changes to Chapter 138, which I think has had more comments than Chapter 535s, which is just to the Park and Recreation Board. But from a legal standpoint, tonight we're just asking for authorization to proceed to advertise it so that a public hearing could occur at the March meeting for consideration of adoption.
Mr. Duraco, did you want to go through it?
Sure. In Chapter 35, the changes really reflect the overall role and responsibility of the Parks Board. The ordinance hadn't been revised or really revisited in many years, and you know, one of the biggest changes, for example, is the Parks Board used to run the day camp. They don't do that anymore. Somebody on staff handles that, and so you know, this change is reflected in that, and so that's, again, it's really focusing on what their role and responsibility is. In Chapter 138, the biggest change, obviously, as Mr. McKenna just mentioned, is the, you know, and I'll just read the language, is the township has the right to permit the consumption of alcohol by all persons of legal age, provided by a licensed distributor for the sole purpose of township-sponsored events with proceeds to benefit township 501c3 organizations or other events approved by the Board of Supervisors. So this really came about to allow the township the flexibility to allow alcohol at certain events. So I'll use Community Day as an example. If we wanted to work with a local brewery to have a beer garden, the board would approve that. The board is obviously, we wrote the language to still give the board the ultimate control over where, when, and how that could potentially happen. That, you know, this change, obviously, we ran it through the Parks Board. They supported that change, and so I'm happy to answer questions if I can about that specific item, if the board has any.
And I will just note that that's a little bit more substance for the second ordinance rather than the first. The first is Parks and Rec. I know that there will be a more discussion on the Chapter 138, which is HR 449.
Yeah, so focused on Chapter 35, Park and Recreation Board. Do we have a motion?
So
moved. Do we have okay. Any board discussion?
I just want to say these, as liaison from the Board of Supervisors to the Parks and Recreation Board, many of these changes really are long overdue. The ordinances for Parks and Recreation have not been changed since 1979, with the exception of the 220 modification in which all parks and open spaces in the township were made tobacco-free. So one of the more meaty, I guess, changes is that we've worked to change the length of service on the board from 5-year term to 3-year term, so that its service will be more in line with the other advisory boards, such as the Library Board and the EAC, which all have 3-year terms. The 5-year term has proven to be actually a little bit too long for board members to serve. Some have had no problem with it, but many have had to resign their positions because of work obligations that arise over that term. So we think by bringing it down to a more manageable and foreseeable term is in the best interest of the Parks Board and the township. So, that, and as Mr. Duraco said, aligning the powers of the Parks Board to be in line with today and the way that any of the parks activities and recreation activities are run by township personnel. We don't want volunteer members having power to hire and fire such individuals. So those are the main changes occurring there, and I thank the township staff for spending a lot of time on this issue and working on these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? Any public comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we move on to the motion to consider and authorize advertisement of a public hearing March 21st, 2022 for H.R. 449 to amend the Code of Tredyffrin Township, Chapter 138, Parks and Playgrounds. Mr. McKenna and Mr. Duraco, do you have more to add for these ones?
No, I was going to simply say it's essentially the same. Again, these were staff recommended changes. Obviously, there's a little bit more difference in substance. One of the things I will point out that we did remove at the recommendation to staff was there was a whole section in 138 on the powers and duties of the Parks and Rec Board, which didn't seem to make much sense given that we have an entire chapter on the powers and duties of the Park and Rec Board. So we simply put a reference to that other ordinance and removed the description of the Parks and Rec. Otherwise, there were a lot of cleanup language in this one. A lot of spelling correction and references were just corrected as well. And then obviously Mr. Director talked about the inclusion of the right to permit the consumption of alcohol under certain circumstances and with board approval.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion?
Yeah, I guess I just have a question. Given that Wilson Park is probably the obvious park, you'd have a party with a beer garden in it. How late do events get scheduled in these parks?
I can honestly say, it's definitely not until, I know, we got, some feedback about the concern about allowing it to go to 11 o'clock. I don't think I've ever seen an event go that late. Again, we are trying to craft this language to give the board the flexibility, but retain that control. So if we were having an event like Community Day where we want, our Community Day hours, I think, end at 7 or 8 p.m. So I think that would be the latest we would go. But again, that's going to be dictated by the board, how late you would want it.
Yeah, and I can give you another example. A couple of years ago, the Paley Blues Fest wanted to use Wilson Farm Park for that, and our ordinance specifically denied that ability. This just gives you the authority if someone, that type of event, there was a 513 in the township, could come in. Again, you're going to set hours, you're going to set additional requirements. So obviously, as the person organizing the event, they're going to have an insurance rider put us as additional carrier. The person with the liquor license is going to be responsible for maintaining their license requirements on the LCB, but you certainly could add additional requirements. That's why it gives the board that flexibility. And I don't see these, we're not looking to do a permanent beer garden or anything of that nature. It's really special events that make sense to the board of supervisors that would be a benefit or enhancement of the community atmosphere of the park. But so it wouldn't be something that would be an ongoing basis.
Any other board comments? Any comments from the public? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Now we move on to new matters. Do we have any board member new matters tonight? Do we have any?
Wait, I actually do, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So as you probably know, in Chesterbrook, we've had 3 different instances where resident kids, bike riders, have built BMX bike courses. Twice they caused a significant amount of damage in parcel 19, and then most recently they built a really pretty impressive BMX course on the Jefferson Road property, which is the school district's property, which they just have I think the school district just shut them down. Clearly this is an amenity that people want. I mean, they're putting a huge amount, these things are big constructions. They're putting a lot of effort into building them. BMX biking is an Olympic sport, just for the record, so this is something people want to do. And I guess I'm bringing this up to ask the township to consider how we provide some accommodation for residents for an amenity that they clearly want. And right now they're doing illegally on property that they shouldn't be doing it on.
I think a nice place to start would be to go to the Park and Rec Board, to have them kind of present their case to the Park and Rec Board, and they can start kind of thinking about and working with the township of where a location could be. Supervisor Humble.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I agree, start with the Parks and Rec Board. We're already discussing BMX bikes or a pump track as options that have been requested repeatedly from residents, so we know it's in demand. We do know it's Olympic sport, and we do want to find a way to make this work in Tredyffrin, to provide this amenity. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments about that? All right, we move on to citizen new matters. Any citizen new matters tonight? I see a hand raised. Go ahead and turn your mute
Oh,
on.
there you go. Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I am sort of new to this, so I apologize. But with it, I was wondering what the steps would be. I did write a letter to the Board of Supervisors, which I dropped off the Township on Thursday. I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to read it or look over it. With that, you know, as Radnor has changed their ordinances throughout, you know, the rental community to college students, Tredyffrin has at this point yet to update their ordinances in that regard. And throughout it, there's certainly landlords that do take it seriously and do enforce their lease, as well as make sure that their properties are up to snuff. And then there are certain landlords that do not. And with that, you know, obviously that hurts property value. It detracts from any new, younger individuals from coming into the area. I know myself, I have my stepdaughter, and with it, also my niece, who I have custody of. And, you know, we plan to be here for many of years. It's just in talking even with friends who have wanted to come here to this area, you know, with everybody that's migrated over from Radnor area and the ordinances that really haven't been put in place. At that point, you know, it was hard for me to recommend doing so. And, you know, as there has been certainly a call to action from the Board of Supervisors to try and get the so-called younger generation in, so that increases not only spending at supermarkets, spending at local shops, stuff of that nature, which will ultimately generate revenue, as well as going out patroning our restaurants, stuff of that nature. Overall, it would help provide that. And so I just wanted to know what the process was to go through that. If you guys did have a chance to look at that letter, and certainly with it to go through, you know, what certain ordinances may need to be potentially updated, which I could present at the next Board of Directors or Board of Supervisors meeting, if possible, with recommendations, and then provide that to you guys there and potentially make a determination.
Thank you. We did get your letter in the mail. I will say it didn't have your email address or phone number on there, so you might want to also email bos@tredyffrin.org. That way we can have a conversation. I also did chat about this issue with Kevin Stroman prior to your letter. I think we can review offline. We did get your letter, and we were looking into Radnor's ordinances. It had been my impression that ours weren't that different from theirs, but that's something that we can certainly look to as a township. And if you do send an email, we can connect and kind of continue this conversation.
Okay.
Would be a great place to start.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Can we comment as well?
Yes.
Mr. Hesner, this is Sharon Humble. I wanted to let you know that I read your letter in detail. I think you've been extremely patient with the situation there. I would have been calling the police a lot sooner than you did over the disturbances, but I did want you to know that I read it in detail, and I'm happy to try to work this out, however we need to do this.
I appreciate that. And, while I did focus certainly on that, particular situation, I'm kind of looking at this in general for rentals throughout the community. I know there's a rental right down the street from us that has a young family in it, which is great. There's also quite a few other college rentals, and some of the landlords have enforced the lease, but right now, as you guys are aware, the ordinance states that it is fully upon the landlord to enforce that lease. So, with it, if they're not willing to impose any sanctions, I can call, Chief Beatty or Lieutenant Moyer as many times as I would like. All they can do, though, unfortunately, is fine the individuals, and it unfortunately does come back to the landlord that with some lack of inspections, as far as the stability and the structural stability of the buildings, calls into question just the, if those houses were to sell to those younger families that were looking to come in, that, they wouldn't be hit with $20,000 or so right off the bat of having to fix things up. So, I think there was quite a few other ordinances I had outlined, but I can certainly email them to you guys, just kind of with some red lines or some additional verbiage, not necessarily changing them.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Any other citizen comments tonight? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
That